Hello, this is a tutorial on how to set up Wwise and Unreal Engine 5 with multiple output devices on Windows. This is something that took me a little bit of a while to work out, and it can be a little bit confusing to set up. I've done it in C++. There is a Unreal module, a blueprint module called AddOutput that we are essentially using the C++ version of, and you should be able to do it that way as well, but in order to access some of the Windows audio devices and stuff, I found it easier to do it in C++, so that's what I've done. I'm going to assume that you know how to integrate Wwise with Unreal, and probably should know a bit of C++, how to work with classes and that kind of thing. There's a few different steps, but if you're not so confident, you can just follow along. So obviously the first thing you want to do is integrate Wwise with the Unreal projects that you've created. I did notice that in 2023 1.0 this blueprint module doesn't exist, so it's best to go with 1.1 or 1.2 at the time of recording. I've got 1.1 installed, and that's what I've done this in previously, so that's what I'm going to do, and I'm just going to integrate the projects. Okay, in terms of how to set up your Wwise project, you need to have basically two master buses to start with. So at the minute we've got one master audio bus, so I'm going to call that bus A, and then you also want to make a second master audio bus, bus B. And by default, both of these masters go to the system audio device, which, depending on how your Wwise project is set up, but most of the time that's just going to be your default Windows device, unless you've done other customization. So to start with, let's get our sound effects objects routed to our buses. So I'm going to send... Oh, I've got these the wrong way around. I've just got a gun sound here. And then there's a music track as well. So the gun is going to come out of one output and the music out the other way. This is made from the PS2 startup sound because it's a really cool sound. So let's route those accordingly. So I've put them in actor mixers just to make it more straightforward. So gun is going to go to bus A, and music is going to go to bus B. So gun to there, music to there. Then let's set up our actual audio devices. So the easiest way to do that is right click on the default work unit for the audio devices, go new child, and then this is a system output. We'll call that system B. You can't rename the main one, the one that comes standard. If you had several audio devices, you could do it like so, but for now we'll just have bus A goes to system and bus B goes to system B. Now let's just make events for those two objects really quickly. So go new event, one event per object, play, and I'm just going to call them gunfire and music track. That's as far as I'm going to do the setup for in this video. If you want to have sounds going to both outputs, or switching sounds between outputs and that sort of thing, you might have to set up auxiliary buses and have like state logic for switching which buses stuff is going to. But for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm just going to have the gun go to output A and the music go to output B. One thing I am going to do actually, just while we are setting up our project, I'm going to route the music back to bus A, just so that when we're demoing things and just checking that we've got the implementation set up right, we can just verify that that's working before we play around with output settings and things. So I'm just going to set that back to A for the meantime. So then here we are in our Unreal project. I've just called it output, and you should have loaded in your 2 events. So gunfire and music track. So let's just quickly set up the 2 events so that they work. You probably know how to do this. Okay, so I've set up the gun. It's the easiest thing in the world. It sounds rubbish, but essentially I just put it on the projectile, so when the projectile spawns it plays the sound on itself. Really rudimentary, basic way of doing it. You can do anything else that you like. Okay, next we want to make our music player, so this will be the actor that's actually going to play the music. So I'm just going to call it BP music player, and we have to set it up slightly differently. One thing that we do have to do is give it an AK component, because we need to assign listeners on this actor, and you can't do that in the sort of straightforward way of posting events on actors. Like so, you have to add an actual AK component. So we're going to want to do that. And then let's just, for now, post event. And we want to post event on the AK component. Like so. So we're not just posting event on the actor, we're posting event on the AK component. That's quite important. And let's tell you what, let's just add cube to this component, sorry, to this actor. That way we can see it in the level, we know what it's doing. One other thing I'm going to do, because this often trips me up and I kind of wish that this was off by default, is the obstruction occlusion. This happens to me quite often, is I'll put something in a level and I can't hear it, or it's filtering, and it's because that's set. If you set it to 0, the AK component will do no obstruction or occlusion. And if it's in blueprints, it's fine, but sometimes you're creating components in C++ and then you realize they've got occlusion on them. You have to go and manually set it to 0. It's a bit annoying, but yeah, just watch out for that one, otherwise you might not be hearing sounds and you won't know why. Let's close these. So we have our 2 sounds set up in the level now. Nothing has any spatialization, but that doesn't matter. This is just for demonstrating outputs. So that's like your basic setup out the way. Just 2 events. One event's going to go to a different sound, and we've got sort of actors for each. Just a reminder: the gun is going to go to output A, and the music is going to go to output B. Okay, and this is where we get into the sort of meat and potatoes of the tutorial. We're going to create a listener class, which is going to handle 2 things. Number 1, it's going to be the listener that will listen for the object that goes to output 2. So it's going to be a specific listener for the secondary output objects. It's going to exist alongside the default listener. So number 1 is that. Number 2, inside this class, we're going to be creating and destroying the new Wwise output when we play and end the level. So I'm just going to make this of type actor, and we can just call it listener. And it's probably going to do some compiling. So we will let that happen. If you are like me and you jumped the gun, you will get a load of errors, linker errors, because you haven't added the module to the dependency in the project. So we need to go to source, go to the project, find the build.cs file. This is all on the Wwise website, by the way, how to integrate C++, or how to integrate Wwise into a C++ project. I just jumped the gun. And to here we want to add AK audio. And Wwise sound engine. Save. Close that. Okay, after adding dependencies, I actually was still getting linker errors. So if you open up your workspace for the project and rebuild it, you should be fine. If you've got these squigglies, you're going to want to regenerate the Visual Studio project files. And they should go away. Just like that. Okay, now that we're all set up with our class, let's get the header set up so that we can start building this actor that's going to be the listener. One thing we're going to want to include right off the bat is Wwise Unreal Object Helper. That is something that lets us include one of the structs that is required for setting up the output device. So we want to make sure that's included. Okay, and then in terms of what we want to populate our class with is just a few things. So first is going to be the actual AK component, which is the listener component. And that is going to be, we're going to forward declare it because we're not including AK component, so we don't need to. That's our AK component. We're also going to need two functions. One is to create the new Wwise output, and one is to remove it. So this is going to be called AddWise output and remove. That's our header. And then one final thing, and this is why we included Wwise Unreal Object Helper, is a AK output device ID. And I'm going to spend some time talking about this because this is one of the things that confused me the most when working out how to use this. Is this output device ID here is not the ID of the Windows device that you are using. This is the ID of the device that Wwise creates. It's a little bit like having a reference to that output device in Wwise. It's so that we use this device, we use this ID so that when we want to remove it, Wwise understands what ID to use. So that's just one to make quite clear, is that ID there is not the device ID of, say, your output, any of these audio outputs. That's not the device ID. We'll be coming across other device IDs for Windows, but this is a Wwise specific one, and I want to make that quite clear because that was just one thing that really got me stuck. So then going over to our C++ class, let's define these functions. So AddWise output, get rid of that. That's just Copilot being Copilot, and remove Wise output. So we're just going to define them like so. Okay, and let's start with this add Wise output function. How are we going to add an output to Wise? Number one, we want to get the number of available audio devices on your Windows system. And the way we do that is we create a variable to store all the number of Windows devices. Get Windows device count. And I've missed a capital I. And then just for sort of helpful reasons, let's log that. So we can just say device count is device count. That's just going to help us out a little bit. And then we want to start looking for the device that we have in mind. So what I'm going to do is create two empty device IDs. One for when we're iterating through them and we can temporarily store a device ID if we want to do things with it. And then one which is the target device ID. So when we found the ID that we actually want to hook up with Wise, we can store that there. So that's going to look like this. AKUint32, and we'll call this found device ID. So this is just the current ID that we're looking at when we're iterating through this Windows device count. And what you can do is just give it a device ID. That's just basically saying, it's a bit like having a null pointer. It's just saying this is a device ID that has nothing in it. And we're going to do the same with the target device ID. So this is the ID that we actually want to do stuff to once we know what that correct ID is. And then the final thing that we're going to do is create a charty pointer called target device name. And that is going to want to be the name of the audio device in your Windows system, verbatim. So Copilot here is suggesting speakers, Realtek. That might be your that might be the one that you want to use. For me, I am using output 1 and 2 on my interface, and I just want to also access 3 and 4. So it's going to be output 3 and 4, open brackets, SSL 2 plus USB audio device. Cool. That's obviously, this is being hard coded here. This is not a sort of production ready way of doing it. You would probably want something like a U property in your header that you could then make the target device name. For the purposes of this, because we're just hard coding it, I have handled it this way. Then we're gonna make a IMM device pointer, which is the pointer to the device that we shall retrieve from one of our functions. And we're going to have an array of UAkGameplayStatics pointers called AkGameplayStatics. and that's the well, Copilot's got it pretty right. Array of AK components to be out. Yeah. So these are essentially the listener components. So this is accessed IMM device. This is name of device we want to use. This is the ID of the device we want to use, and this is the ID device we found. Yeah, Copilot's pretty right there. And that brings me on to a couple of quick things. I've forgotten my includes on the C++ class. So we've created this array of AK components, but we've not included it. So things are going to get confusing. So we're going to want to include AK component. We're going to want to include AddGameplayStatics. And I think that's it. I don't think we need anything else right now. The other thing that I've forgotten to do is construct our AK component. And there you go. Copilot wants us to do it for us. Equals create. So that is actually creating the AK component on our actor. Let's set up attachment, and we'll do that on the root component. And then, like I mentioned earlier, occlusion refresh interval equals 0. Don't want occlusion on our listener. That's not helpful. Okay, let's carry on with defining our C++ class for adding the Wwise output. The first thing we'll do is, Copilot's got it exactly right. Well, almost exactly right. Iterate through Windows IMM devices. So these are the available audio devices that are available to Wwise. And we will do that like so, with a sort of standard for loop. And we're checking if it's less than our IMM device count, which is the number of audio devices available. And every time we go through one, we iterate, or sorry, we increase I, increment I. Okay, so before we actually get our target device, let's just make sure that this is all set up correctly. So right now we're just gonna iterate through all of the available Windows devices. We're gonna pull out the name of the device that we found and the ID of the device that we found, just to make sure that that's all working correctly. So how do we do that? First, we call AkGetWindowsDevice, and it wants the index. So the index is going to be I, because we're iterating through everything inside of IMM device count. So the index is I, and then it is, where do you want to store the device ID that we found? Well, that's going to be found device ID. Where do you want to store the pointer to the IMM device? Well, that's going to be in P device. Actually, that needs the reference operator. And what device state? Well, we want the active audio devices. So AK audio device state active. So what that's going to do is it's going to pull the Windows device at a certain point in this device count. It's going to store the device ID in device ID. It's going to store a pointer to the actual device in this IMM device pointer. And yeah, we only want to check things that are actually active. Then let's get the name of the device that we're accessing, because that's helpful. So we do that like so. And that's, let's call this found device name. So this can go alongside found device ID as found device name. And we're going to set that to aka get Windows device name. And again, it's at the position of I. The device that we want to get the name of, well, that's the one that we just found using this. So that would be found device ID. And again, it should just be ones that are active. And let's just go through all of those in our IMM device count and log them all in the console when we play our level. So we're going to go found device, and that's going to be, oops, the string, which is, we're going to plug in the device name, and we'll write the device ID is the ID. So this will be found device name. That's going there, and then found device ID. That's going there. And I have an error. Okay, I've just played around. I'm not sure what the error was, but just make sure that these two lines of code look like this. Okay, once you have done that, you want to compile all your code, reopen the editor, and we're going to make a blueprint class based on listener. And I'm just going to put that in blueprints. And it's going to be called BP listener. Here we are, and we can see that it's inherited the AK component. And if we go to the event graph, all we're going to do is just call that Wwise output function, because all that should be doing right now is logging all of the available Windows audio devices. Let's hit play. Well, no wonder it didn't work. I hadn't added it to the level. So here it is in the level now, our BP listener. And if we hit play, go to the log, you should see, obviously you're not going to see the same as me, but you should see all of your system audio devices. I've also got a load of these null ones. I think that's because I've got some stuff with Dante set up on my computer, so I think it's created a load of virtual audio devices that the Windows Device Manager is not super happy with. You shouldn't have these sorts of things. If you do, it's not a problem, because we're not going to try and access them. We're not going to do anything with them. They're just null. We're going to access these ones. But here you can see, here's this is one of my monitors. This is one of my other monitors. That's a virtual audio device that I've set up. That's the one that we want to target right there. That's another virtual audio device. That's my motherboard. That's my output that I'm using right now. So that's good. We've successfully accessed all of the audio devices on our Windows system. Let's have a look at how we can set up Wwise to use one of them. So the way that we're going to set up Wwise, first we want to make sure that we have, we're accessing the specific device that we want. So the way I'm going to do that is go if, string target device name is equal to found device name. Well then, if that's the case, then we found the we've got to the point in the loop where we have accessed the device that we're looking for. So we've accessed this one, in which case target device ID is equal to found device ID, or rather assign target device ID to the one that we've currently accessed. And let's just put a nice log statement in there as well, just to double check that we've got it. So target device found, device ID, put the ID in there, and we're going to plug in target device name and target device ID. Cool, let's compile that and just check out all of that. So I'm going to run and build. Oh, sorry, one thing that we do definitely want to do if we found the target device is break. Stop the loop. We found the right one, stop the loop. So just to break down what we've done there, we're iterating through all of the available devices and windows based on this IMM device count that we have. And then if we find the device with the name we want, we store the ID in target device ID. Super. Right, on to Wwise. Okay, let's get Wwise set up with this device that we found. There's one thing I forgot to do at the top here, which is actually add the component, the AK component that we've created to the array that we created. And we do it like that. AK components, add AK component. So that's only because the Wwise function that we need to add the device wants an array. As it happens in this class, we've only got one component, but it wants us to give it an array, so we're going to give it an array. So we've made an array with one AK component in it, and that AK component is this guy that we created up here. So it's the listener component, and we're adding it to this array. Moving on. The next thing that we need to make for Wwise is some output settings, and that is a struct called AK output settings. And these are the settings that the AddOutput function takes in order to sort of configure the output that it's creating for us. So we'll make a AK output settings struct, and we'll call it new output settings, and let's give it some parameters. So what I will also recommend you do is, if you go to type definition, you can see the properties that it wants us to give. So the first one is the audio device share set name. So what is that? That is the name of the device that we created in Wwise here. This is the audio device share set, and system_B is the name of it. So let's put that in first. Parameter 1 is going to be system_B. Let's make a comma. Let's make a new line for the next parameter. What's the next parameter? The ID of the device that we're accessing. What's that? Well, that is target device ID. Next is, let's have a look, the panning rule. So I think by default it's speakers. You can leave it as speakers, or you can have it as headphones. It's up to you. I'm going to go with speakers, And finally, last one, channel configuration. And as standard, it's just AKParent, so why don't we pop that in there as well. And let's close that off like that. So this is the new output settings struct that we've created, and we can now use that to set everything up. And then the sort of final moment is, in this function anyway, we call AKGameplayStatics, which is a sort of library of functions that Wwise gives you to use, and we're going to call AddOutput. And here you can see, first of all, it wants the output settings. Okay, that's going to be the one that we've just created, which is new output settings. What does it want next? Now this is the one that I wanted to warn everyone about. The output device ID. That is not the ID of the IMM device that we've accessed. Like I said earlier, that is the ID that we're going to store our Wwise ID in. That's the variable that we're going to store our Wwise ID in. If you give it target device ID, this is an output parameter, so it's going to overwrite that. It's going to overwrite this value here, which we don't want to do. What we do want to do though is give it this, which we created in our header, which is Wwise device ID. And then finally, the array of components that the listeners will be assigned to for this output, or I think Wwise have worded it better, specific listeners to attach to this device. If specified, only sounds routed to game objects sent to those listeners will play in this device. It is necessary to have separate listeners if multiple devices of the same type can exist. I think that also applies to system devices, so because we have 2 system devices in use at the moment, we need to have specific listeners for each. So let's put in our listener array, which is called AK components. Oh, that's wrong. And that's the end of that function. Relatively long, so let's just comment this up so that we know what's going on. So this is create AK output settings with IMM device ID and output parameters, and then here we're calling Wwise to create a new output with desired parameters. Lovely. And then how do we remove it? Well, that's pretty simple. We just call UAkGameplayStatics remove output. And what does it want? It wants an output device ID. So this is why we store this variable, not that variable. This is why we store this variable when we create the output, so that we can then do something to the output. It's a little bit like having a reference or a pointer to that output. It's the ID that we can do things on. So that's going to be Wwise device ID. So there we go. We've defined functions to create and remove the outputs. We're not quite there yet, but let's see if we can add these outputs, and let's see if Wwise is recognizing that happening. Okay, so I have compiled our code, and let's open up our listener class. And this is, again, this entire tutorial is pretty kind of rudimentary. It's more to demonstrate how to do something. It's not necessarily best practices. But for the purposes of this, we're going to create the output on begin play and destroy it on end play. Remove Wwise output. So that's our function that we created inside of listener. And if we play, no errors, which is good news. And stop. No errors when stopping either. Let's open up Wwise. And if we connect to the platform, let's go to the advanced profiler, which is F6. Right now we've got one audio device. Let's hit play. 2 audio devices, how about that? And it's even saying the specified listener, which is our BP listener.ak component. And when we stop, it should remove it again. Yeah, it's gone. So we've sort of successfully created a new output, new audio device output, and we have specified the correct listener to be listening to it. Let's see if we can finally get some sound coming out of 2 outputs. Okay, so to make our music use this new output instead of the one that it's currently going to, we need to reassign the listener that it uses. So presently, if we hit play, Wwise project. Whenever you create an Unreal project, the default listener is always attached to the camera. So let's change that. Let's make it listen to our listener objects that we've created. So how do we do that? We are going to, actually I'm going to keep that because we can just stick this in before. I'm just going to put that to the side. First we want to get all actors of class BP listener. So that is basically telling Unreal, get all actors in the world that are of this specific class, and what it gives us is an array of BP listener objects. So let's iterate through these. So we're going to do for each. So for each actor in this actors array, what do we want to do? Well, we need to get I know what my mistake was. So once we've accessed our BP listeners and we have the array, what we want to do is get AK component, and that is here. This is a variable of BP listener, so want to do that. It wasn't possible previously because I had set the access specifiers wrong, so just go back up into your header file and change the access specifiers on this U property to the following. So visible anywhere, blueprint read only, and then I've got the category as Wwise. You can set it whatever you want. I think it was just edit anywhere before, so you want it to be visible anywhere, blueprint read only, and now that's working. Cool. So next, so we've accessed the AK component, and just a reminder that this is the listener component that is assigned to this secondary output. So that's what this component is doing. It's the listener component that belongs to our BP listener class, and what we're doing is inside of music player, we're accessing it. What we're going to do is make array. It might not want you to, but you can. So we're making our component, we're adding it to an array, and then what we're going to do is call the set listeners function. This is a function of AK component, and what are the listeners? Well, the listeners are the ones that we have collected from here, from BP listener, And what's the target? Well, the target is the AK component that belongs to this music player. So this is the emitter that we want to be listened to by these listeners that we've found. And they're going to be associated with this new output that we've created. So let's compile and save that. Once that has compiled and saved with our listener function, we can just reattach this post AK event node. So that is going to make the music play when we play our level. And now it's time to test it out. So we can go back to our music actor mixer, and now you want to set this to B. I've just tested this. You want to set it to B. So I think originally we had it as A, so that we could just, you know, test our setup and that kind of thing. That now needs to be bus B, which means that it's going to system B, which means that it is going to our new audio device. And let's test it out. Give it a play. So I'm currently listening to output 1 and 2 on my audio interface, and I can hear this gun. And then if I plug my headphones into 3.4, I can hear 3.4. You're not going to hear it on this capture because I'm capturing my system audio output, which this is not. So hopefully you were successful following that along. If you are unsuccessful, try retracing your steps, have a look back at the code, make sure that you are plugging the right values in here and there. And yeah, thanks for watching. That's how to set up 2 system audio devices using Wwise and Unreal Engine 5 on Windows.